Ugh. Hey everyone. Oh, jeez. Sorry, let me just make myself a little more presentable. Oh, jeez, there's glitter everywhere. Oh, sorry about that. I just came from a really special event. Can you guess what it was? It was a wedding, actually. Yeah, a buddy of mine just got married today, and I'm just coming from that ceremony now. Don't worry, we all wore our masks and we were socially distanced the whole time. Weddings during the pandemic can be a real pain in the butt, but they wanted to get married, so here we are.
Well, at least you had something to do.
Oh, hey everybody, it's Rachel. How are you doing, Rachel?
I'm fine, thanks. I was just listening to you telling the kids about the wedding you went to. I gotta admit, I'm a bit jealous. I haven't had any celebrations like that to go to in a while.
I know what you mean. The pandemic makes it really hard to do anything, and now we're in the middle of the second wave. I guess all we can really do now is hunker down and pray that it passes pretty quickly.
I guess so. So what happened at the wedding you went to?
Well, it was pretty traditional, actually. The bride wore a long white gown, and the groom had a snazzy tuxedo, and everybody was dressed up nice. I even got my nice vest on. After the wedding, there was a big party too, with lots of dancing and food.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. Was there a favorite tradition that you enjoyed the most?
Hmm. I guess my favorite part is when everybody gets up to tell funny stories about the bride and groom.
I was at a wedding once where the bride threw a bouquet over her shoulder, and whichever woman caught that bouquet would be married next.
Well, that sounds like a ton of fun. Weddings are really important celebrations, aren't they? It's when we all come together and celebrate the love between two people. In the church, the love in a marriage is considered to be really important. It's a reflection of the love that God has for all of us. We believe this because Jesus had a lot of lessons about marriage. He often used marriage as a parable for God's love and for the love that he has for the church.
Oh, right, parables. Those were metaphorical stories that Jesus told to explain the important aspects of heaven and God. So Jesus told parables about weddings.
Yes, you see, in Jesus' time, many marriages were arranged, and a bride and a groom often didn't meet each other until the day of their wedding. This was considered a really joyous occasion when two people were brought together to form a brand new symbiotic life and to start a whole new family together. Jesus compared this joy to the joy of God's coming to earth to save his people.
That sounds like a big idea.
It really is, and there's a whole lot to unpack there.
Well, maybe you can help me and the kids understand better by telling us one of those parables.
Oh, for sure. Our first story is the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. Jesus told this story to his disciples when they asked him about the coming of God.
Once upon a time, there were 10 bridesmaids. Their job was to greet the wealthy groom who was on his way from another city to marry their friend, the bride. After his arrival, there was to be a big party to celebrate the union of the couple. The groom was set to arrive at dusk, and so the 10 bridesmaids brought oil lamps with them so that they could see when it got dark. 5 of the bridesmaids were smart and bought extra oil in the town for their lamps, just in case they needed it. But the other 5 were foolish, and they didn't think to buy the extra oil. The bridesmaids went to the house where they were to wait for the groom to show up. But the groom was delayed on his journey, and, as the sun set, the bridesmaids found that they had to wait longer, and longer than expected. As the time dragged on, they began to fall asleep one by one. Their lamps kept on burning, and as their oil ran out, the flames grew dim. Around midnight, the bridesmaids were suddenly awoken by a yell in the night.
The groom is coming! The groom is coming! Everybody wake up! The groom is coming to meet his bride!
Surprised at his sudden arrival, the bridesmaids scrambled to fix their makeup and make themselves presentable. They took up their lamps to leave the house, but found that they had grown too dim to light the street outside. The 5 bridesmaids who had thought ahead and bought extra oil topped up their lamps, and their flames grew bright again. But the 5 foolish bridesmaids who hadn't planned ahead were left in the dark.
Hey, give us some oil so that we can see outside.
Sorry, we only have enough oil for our own lanterns. We can't give you any.
While the 5 smart bridesmaids went to meet the groom, the 5 foolish ones hurried back into town to buy more oil. They had to search a long time before they found a vendor willing to sell to them so late at night. When they had finally gotten enough oil, they hurried down the road to the party venue. But by the time they got there, they found the door already closed and locked.
Let us in! Let us in! We're bridesmaids of the groom!
What do you mean? Our bridesmaids are already seated at the table. Our wedding party is full. I'm sorry, but I have no idea who you are. Just like the groom, the coming of God's resurrected Son may take longer than you think. You may have to wait a long time to see his return. But, like the flame of an oil lamp, you must always keep your faith fed so that it can burn brightly and light your way back to God.
Wow, that was a great story. I feel bad for the bridesmaids that got locked out of the party, though.
So do I, Rachel, but there's a lesson here about the importance of being prepared. We don't know when Jesus will return to the earth to bring us to the kingdom of heaven, but we always have to do his work and always be prepared for when that time comes.
I guess it will really be a party when Jesus comes back. Are there any other stories about weddings in heaven?
Well, actually, do you remember when we were talking about how Jesus was often at odds with the religious authorities in Jerusalem? He would often tell parables that subtly condemned their hypocrisy.
I do. Last week you told us the story of the vineyard owner whose son was murdered by greedy farmers.
Exactly. Well, this is another story that Jesus told directly to the religious authorities. Only in this story, God is an actual king, and Jesus is the crown prince of his kingdom.
Once there was a king whose son, the crown prince, was getting married. The king spent a lot of money putting together as big a party as he could. There were acrobats, jesters, animals, and a magnificent feast. The king sent out messengers to all the towns and cities in his kingdom, inviting his lords, knights, dukes, and governors to come to the feast. He wanted to invite everyone, but the lords weren't as excited about the prince's wedding. Each of them came up with an excuse not to come to the wedding feast.
Oh, a wedding. I hate weddings, and I've got to do my taxes tonight. I can't come.
I'm sorry, I can't make it to the wedding. I'm super busy with work right now.
Oh, I don't have time for that. I just got married myself and my wife wants to go on her honeymoon.
But my dog just had puppies and I really want to play with the puppies.
Oh, sorry. My ankle is sore.
Sorry, I got a cough. Does the king have a son?
But those excuses weren't even the worst thing that the messengers encountered. Some of the king's lords hated the crown prince, since he would be king and rule them after his father. These bitter lords didn't just reject the messengers who came, but they beat up and even killed some of them. When the king heard that some of his messengers had been so badly treated by the lords and that no one wanted to come to his son's wedding celebration, he was furious.
If they won't come, then I'll find another way to fill my banquet hall. Go to all of the cities and towns of the lords who rejected my invitation, and find anyone in the street who has no home, who is working for his bread, who is carrying water home to his family. Bring all of those poor and hard-working people to my palace, so that they can celebrate my son's wedding with me. And as for those lords who rejected my offer and beat up my messengers, I will send out my armies to destroy them, burn down everything that they own, destroy their homes, and destroy all of the vegetation on their lands. They must know that I am the king, and such disrespect is intolerable.
Wow, that ended intensely.
It did. Jesus warned the leaders of the temple that they would suffer because of their hypocrisy and their sacrilege to God. And he was right. 40 years later, the temple was completely destroyed by the Romans, who tore it down brick by brick.
Well, that's depressing. Can we focus on the good part of the story? When none of the king's guests were worthy enough to come to his feast, he invited the regular people to come to his palace instead. That must have been really great surprise for them. It's great to know God judges who is worthy and unworthy based on their hearts and not on how powerful or rich they are.
That's a really great takeaway from the story, Rachel.
Well, thanks for the stories, Murray. It's been a great time talking to you.
You too, Rachel. Take care and stay safe. Here are some story review questions. What do you remember? Why did the bridesmaids have to wait so long at the house? Why were 5 of the bridesmaids late for the wedding party? How do you think the bride and groom must have felt when half of their bridesmaids didn't show up for the wedding feast? How do you think the king felt when nobody wanted to come to his son's wedding? How do you think his son felt? What was the king's reaction when everybody rejected his invitation? Here are some questions that you can discuss with your family. What are some funny stories that your parents or your siblings have of weddings that they've been to? What was their favorite wedding? If you were to get married, how would you want your wedding to look? How would you make it a really special time for your friends and family, and for the person that you love? In the story of the 10 bridesmaids, some bridesmaids had extra oil to keep the flames in their lamps bright, but others didn't. What do you think those flames represent? Have you ever been unprepared for an important event? What happened? What was the consequence?